All right, good morning. This meeting is called to order at 9:05 a.m. Director Ross, can you please take roll?
Dr. Kaur is not with us today. Vice President Haley,
Here.
Superintendent Horn, Member Catanese will be joining virtually and is not with us at the moment. Member Clark, Dr. Clay is not with us yet. Dr. Hagerman,
Here.
Member Kravickas, Member Meyerson, Member Tovar,
Present.
and for the first time, and welcome, Dr. Cruz Rivera.
Present.
Member Haley, we have a quorum.
Okay, great. And just as a reminder to all virtual members, please unmute and turn on your cameras when we are voting, which will be later this morning. So we don't really have a president's report, but I do want to welcome you, Dr. Cruz Rivera. Thank you so much for being with us today, and we're thrilled that you are on the board. And so we know you'll contribute greatly to our conversation and the work we get to do. So with that, I would like to pass it on to Superintendent Horn. Do you have a superintendent's report?
I do, thank you. Yeah, I also want to welcome President Cruz Rivera. I've gotten to know him on the Board of Regents, and he is doing a very able job. My superintendent's report this morning is a very happy one. I get to recognize the Arizona History Teacher of the Year, and that's special for me because had I not been a lawyer, I would have been a history teacher. I've been reading history almost every night since I was about 14, and so I'm very jealous of him. And so I'll read the award from here. I'll come down, we'll do a presentation, take some pictures. I'll come back and I guess we'll do a picture with all the board members. Ashley Crows is the Arizona Gilder Lehrman History Teacher of the Year. Ashley Crows is a national board certified teacher. For those of you who don't know, becoming a nationally board certified teacher is an enormous amount of very, very hard work and very time consuming work. With a proven ability to teach students how to think critically, using inquiry and a variety of instructional methods from 22 years of ongoing experience. Ashley earned his degrees from Northern Arizona University and teaches at Saguaro High in Scottsdale, Arizona. He was a semifinalist for Arizona Education Foundation State Teacher of the Year in 2022 and Scottsdale Charles Teacher of the Year in 2020. Ashley is a United States Holocaust Memorial Museum Teacher Fellow and also serves on Northern Arizona University's AZ K-12 Center Board of Directors, as well as on the board for the Phoenix Holocaust Association. We would like to thank Ashley for his dedication to history education here in Arizona and the continued impact he has on his students and peers. So Ashley, if you would come forward, I think somebody's supposed to have a word for me to do.
You want us to come down there, Sean, or what's your preference? Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you.
That concludes my report.
So awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you so much, Superintendent Horn. That was an outstanding presentation. We're excited for you. The next is Director Ross. It's time for your Executive Director's report, please.
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. The feel good energy continues as we move from honoring an outstanding teacher to a couple of outstanding kiddos from across the state. As always, we open the meeting by honoring 2 students for State Board Students of the Month. And we have 2 kids today. We have one with us virtually, one with us in person. And the first is, who's joining us virtually, is Emily Sanchez from Holbrook High School. Emily's a 9th grade student, was nominated by Principal Grau at Holbrook Junior High. Emily served as vice president at Holbrook Junior High for Student Council, volunteered in the community, and presents at monthly Holbrook Unified Governing Board meetings to keep them updated on school and community activities. Served as a team manager for volleyball and basketball teams while also playing softball. Graduated at top of her class and is recognized as a state winner with the Messianic Lodge of the Student Community for the Student Community Service Award. So joining us virtually today from Holbrook is Emily Sanchez. Emily, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Emily Sanchez. I have a passion for sports, particularly softball, and I also enjoy being part of the color guard with the marching band. I am proud to have earned 3 medals for achieving all A's in junior high, being named Student of the Year, and ranking in the top 10% of my class. My confidence and willingness to ask questions have always helped me thrive, and my family has been a constant source of encouragement and ensuring I strive for my best. My future goals include graduating as valedictorian and pursuing my love for softball at the college level. Thank you.
That's so cool. Wow.
So let's give Emily a hand. And Emily, I know you're not with us in person today, but we have a plaque for you recognizing you as a Student of the Month, which we will be sending out. And congratulations and for representing not only Arizona, but Holbrook especially, which is a pretty special place in Arizona.
All right, Emily, we have you up on our projector screen. Can you smile and I'll try and take a picture of you with the board members?
Okay.
And so our second student is with us in person today. Kaylin Kendrick is a 7th grade student at Thunderbolt Middle School. And we're especially excited from Lake Havasu Unified School District. And Kaylin and her family drove up today to be with us to receive this award. So we're very thankful for that. Was nominated by Principal Black at Jamaica Elementary School, embodies leadership, serving as a student council president, and made the daily announcements, was a representative of the National Honor Society, earned a gold medal presidential award at the Evening of Excellence for maintaining straight A's since kindergarten, is active in theater and dance, and her peers and her teachers described her as self-aware, in tune with her emotions, steadfast in her values, and full of integrity. So let's welcome Kaylin Kendrick.
Okay.
There you go.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kaylin Kendrick. I'm in 7th grade, and I attend Thunderbolt Middle School in Lake Havasu City. I want to start by saying thank you for choosing me as one of the Arizona Students of the Month. I understand that this is a big accomplishment, and I'm forever grateful to have this opportunity. I attended Jamaica Elementary School last year, where I was nominated for this award, and I want to thank everyone at that school for everything they have done for me, specifically my principal, Mrs. Black, my teacher, Mrs. Kendrick, or my mom over there, and my teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez. They've all helped me to grow so much over this past year, and they're one of the reasons why I'm here today making this speech. Them and the rest of the staff are what I loved about that school the most. My accomplishments over the past year have been holding the positions of Jamaica Student Council President, Jamaica Theater Club President, NEHS Representative, and Jamaica Educational Tour Group Representative. I've also recently earned the President's Award for Academic Excellence. And I got a 90 to 100% grade in every class from kindergarten to now. I take these achievements with pride and I'm honored to have them. The thing that has made me grow the most as a student is personal development, whether it be mentally maturing, gaining more knowledge over time, or the personal growth as a person from my peers and teachers. I'm very fortunate to have had a way to express my personality with Jamaica. In high school, I plan on engaging myself in theater, but ensuring that it does not distract me from my educational needs. I would also, one of my largest academic goals is to graduate as valedictorian of the class of 2030. During my junior and senior year, I would like to apply to the Juilliard School in New York, as well as other schools that support my career path of acting. Um, and I just aspire to become an actress and showcase my theatrical talents in New York. And although some people may think this would be a waste of my academic abilities, I would be doing the thing I love most, and that's what truly matters to me. As I conclude my speech, I would like to give a final thank you to everyone who has followed me on my journey until now. I truly wouldn't be here today without you. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for choosing me as one of your Arizona September Students of the Month.
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, that concludes the executive director's report.
Awesome. Well, we had two amazing students. I think we're all inspired. And if Dr. Core would be here, he'd say that was the best part of the meeting. So thank you for recognizing those students today. We're now moving to item 2, the call to the public. This is a time for the public to comment on items not on today's agenda or on the consent portion of the agenda. All speakers will be limited to 2 minutes. Director Ross, have we received requests to speak?
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up first will be Jeanette Perry, followed by Crystal Benfield, and then Angela Faber. So I've been asked to repeat that. First was Jeanette Perry, followed by Crystal Benfield, and then Angela Faber.
Good morning, esteemed members of the Arizona State Board of Education. My name is Jeanette Aldana Perry, and I stand before you today not only as a concerned parent, but as a voice for countless families across Arizona who rely on the ESA program to give their children the education they deserve. I am a stay-at-home mother of 4 and homeschool parent to 2 elementary-age children, one of whom has autism. Like many families in our situation, ESA was supposed to be a lifeline, a tool to provide our children with the tailored resources they need to thrive. But lately, that promise has felt more like a burden. Let me begin by saying that I appreciate the spirit behind the ESA program. I understand the need for oversight to ensure funds are used responsibly. But what we are experiencing now is beyond responsible oversight. It's an overwhelming level of bureaucracy that is crushing the very families ESA is supposed to help. Under the current rules, we now have to write a curriculum for every single item we purchase. Books, pencils, crayons, paper, basic educational tools that my children rely on every day to engage with learning. Now, I'm being told I must justify each of these purchases by submitting a curriculum. How do I create a curriculum for a pencil? Do I need to explain that crayons help my children express themselves when words fail them? Should I outline a detailed plan for how paper will allow my children to write and improve their motor skills? The second issue I need to address today is the growing delay in reimbursements. It's now taking more than 2 months for basic purchases to be approved. That's over 2 months of waiting to be reimbursed for essential educational materials, delays that directly impact my ability to support my children's learning. The ESA program was supposed to empower us, but what good is empowerment if we're constantly tied down by red tape? How can we provide our children with the resources they need if we're forced to jump through endless hoops and wait months to be reimbursed? I urge you to consider the very real and human impact of these policies. Our children don't have time to wait for bureaucratic processes. They need support now, today, so they can continue to learn, grow, and succeed. Thank you for your time.
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next is Crystal Benfield, followed by Angela Faber, and then Angela Frazier. We're going to check to see if one of the folks outside. No? Okay. So is Crystal Benfield with us? Angela Faber?
Good morning. Thank you, Superintendent Horn and members of the State Board of Education. Here we are, another month and another board meeting, and yet there is still no agenda item for ESA. Once again, parents are forced to speak under public comment with no dedicated agenda item to ensure that our concerns are being heard. Meanwhile, ESA students remain in the media spotlight. They are continuously harassed by local government officials, media, teachers' unions, and even current public school teachers. We respectfully request that ESA be placed on next month's agenda so that some of our concerns can be directly addressed by Superintendent Horn and the board members. Despite hundreds of written comments, numerous in-person speakers, and virtual testimonies, we continue to face unresolved issues. The adopted 2024-2025 handbook has proven ineffective. The ESA department is severely understaffed, and the curriculum approval requirement is making purchases nearly impossible due to long wait times for review and approval. Approvals are taking weeks, and even when granted, purchases are being canceled due to price changes or items being out of stock, forcing us to restart the process and endure additional delays. Reimbursements are being delayed for months, leaving families waiting on thousands of dollars, funds many of us can't afford to cover in the interim. As a result, families are being forced to cancel therapies and special education services for their children. We are desperate for help, yet communication from the department has been virtually non-existent. We ask that you prioritize these concerns at your next meeting. Additionally, Attorney Chris Mays has cited that the handbook and ADA regulations to support her conspiracy theory. The State Board of Education has the authority to revise this handbook and begin new rulemaking to clarify these regulations on an emergency basis. Why hasn't this been done yet? On behalf of 77,000 plus students, I stand before you today and request immediate action. Thank you.
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next is Angela Frazier, followed by Thor Frazier and Melissa Gardner.
Good morning. We are a one-income household struggling to miss rising costs in the current economy. With the ESA program, I don't have to worry about how I'm going to afford giving my children a high-quality education. They're able to work with tutors, register for sports, participate in music classes, purchase curriculum, art supplies, reading books, and attend cultural events. They're able to receive a high-quality education that caters to each of their needs and interests without our family having to be high-income earners. With funding following students to their education of choice, they have a greater opportunity to foster a love of learning. Every student in Arizona should have the freedom to choose what form of education fits them best. Micro schools, charter schools, private schools, religious schools, government schools, or homeschools should all be options for students here in Arizona. ESA provides a way for students with less means to be able to choose where their needs will best be met. Having the funding follow the student rather than funding a system. There are individuals and organizations who seem to be trying to dismantle the ESA program before it has even been given a real chance to prove how cost-effective it is for the state and educationally beneficial it is for students here in Arizona. When officials are voted into office, they are given a certain time frame to prove their worth to their constituents. No matter what party they may be registered with, they are still there to represent everyone under their jurisdiction, not just those who voted for them. The ESA program should be given the same opportunity. It was approved by the Arizona legislature, which consists of more than just one party, but now those who disagree with its legal implementation are attempting to cause as much disruption to it as possible. There needs to be a level of respect between parties or between those who have different views when it comes to education. Arizona has been funding the education system rather than the students for years, and our students are not winning because of it. They're actually trailing behind most other students across the United States. It's time to allow ESA its opportunity to fund the students rather than the system and let it prove through its uninterrupted implementation how much more cost-effective and beneficial it is to Arizona and its students. Thank you.
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Thor Frazier, followed by Melissa Gardner, and then Jonath Ivy.
Hello, my name is Thor, and I have severe oppositional defiance disorder, ADHD, and Tourette's. I started school in Canada at a school that specialized in behavioral issues. My classroom had one teacher, 2 aides, and could have at most 6 students. When I began school, my parents didn't know all of my diagnosis. When I was about 6, we moved to Idaho, and when I was in 3rd grade, I found out I had Tourette's. Due to my behaviors, I had to have a pair with me at all times. Sometimes the cops had to be there to help because I would run from the school, and I was known to flip the police off. There are other examples I could list, but I'd rather not mention them. Public schools may work for some kids, and they may want that. But for me, the environment there did not help my struggles at all. I want to say in how I get to learn. I want the freedom to choose a learning environment that suits me best. The ESA program has made it possible for us to purchase curriculum, pencils, a one-on-one German language tutor for me, books that I'm actually interested in reading, and go to events like Shen Yun. My mom even got us front row seats because she didn't want me to disturb other people. During the second act, when the curtains opened, a huge wall of fog swept over me, and I saw that the orchestra became completely covered in it. And I find that kind of funny because I don't know how they were able to see their sheet music. Without the ESA program, we wouldn't be able to afford things like that. The economy has been really hard on us and many other people, and I just want to say that we have really been blessed with ESA. Thank you.
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next is Melissa Gardner, followed by Jonath Ivy, and then Julia Ivy.
Good morning. I have many things in common with all of you. With the exception of Superintendent Horn, who is an elected official, the remainder of you are appointed in your positions on this board. When I chose to become a mother to my 5 kids, 2 of which who are school age and enrolled in the ESA program, one of which has special needs, I was also appointed to my position as an advocate for my children's education. Just like you, I wear many hats, and I have to carefully divide my valuable time between each of these roles. We are similar in that you are not paid for your service. To my disappointment, neither am I. But here's where we really differ. You have the ability to be reimbursed for your travel cost. And if I can be so bold as to assume you do not have to wait 4 weeks, 8 weeks, or the 11 weeks, which is how long I've been waiting for qualified educational purchases for my children with no end in sight, and when I will receive the $5,000 owed to me by the Empowerment Scholarship account. If I may, I would assume your reimbursement process is well-defined, with parameters that all employees can understand and cross-reference to ensure a timely return of your hard-earned funds. This is not the case for me and for tens of thousands of ESA families. In this program, my guidelines are clear when I submit for reimbursement, as I ensure I am following every detail provided. But unlike you, my reimbursements are under heavy scrutiny. When my reimbursements are submitted, I am not only accountable for the current submission requirements, but I am subjected to new rules that surface during my painstakingly slow wait for reimbursement. I would venture to guess if you had to endure checking your email as I do multiple times a day, hoping to see the white unicorn approval email that brings relief that I'll be getting my money back, you would be as frustrated as the tens of thousands of parents in this program. My guess is that, like me, you would feel anything but empowered. Most definitely, you would also feel frustrated, anxious, and even scared to use your own funds due to long reimbursement timeframes. If I may, can I request an additional 30 seconds to finish my statement? Thank you. We differ in that when you are traveling and using your money for reimbursements, you're able to use your debit card. I am not even offered a debit card to access these funds. It is disappointing to see those that are in leadership positions, and I am looking at each of you for not helping Arizona families who are choosing to think outside of the box to have our children's education needs met. As I mentioned, one of my daughters has special needs. She is thriving in a small group environment where several parents have gone together, and we have chosen to pay a very good salary to our teacher. I am thankful for this program, but we need your help. And again, I am looking at each one of you. My name is Melissa Gardner, and I am an ESA parent. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa.
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next is Julia Ivy, followed by Jonathan Ivy, and then Samuel Ivy. Oh, okay. Sorry, that's how we originally had it. And then, so no, that's no problem. So up first is Jonathan Ivy, and then Julia, and then Samuel.
Samuel.
Then Samuel, then Julia. Okay, we got it.
Hello, Board of Education. I'm Jonathan, and me and my brother both have autism, and some of the new changes are making it harder for us to get the education we need. There is multiple problems, but I'll only be listing one or two. First is some of the things that shouldn't need curriculums now do need curriculums, and it makes it harder because these new curriculums also need to have the exact item, the kid's number, and the kid's name, making it harder for parents to make the curriculum so that the kids can get what they need. I read books that are this big in a couple of days, and these are books that are my age, and my mother, with these new requirements, is finding it really hard to get educational books so that I can continue my learning. There's also been backing up for things that shouldn't be backed up and should be immediately approved, and it has been making it really hard as we are getting stuff for math and English, and then a long time later, a month or two, it gets approved, but the seller isn't selling it anymore. So we have to go through the process again, and it just makes it harder. I'd like that these changes be made so that it is easier for us as both children and parents.
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next is Samuel Ivy, followed by Julia Ivy, and then Magic Aldana.
Hello, members of the board. My name is Sam. I am an autistic student who uses ESA to home educate. I am currently taking trigonometry. I will finish my class before November, Because of this, I wanted to get a graphing calculator to have when I take my next math class, pre-calculus. Graphing calculators should be an item that is automatically approved. It is not. My mom ordered a graphing calculator on August 24. That order was not approved until September 18th. Because it took so long, the seller canceled the order. Things like this are hard to handle and make it harder to get my education. Thank you.
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next is Julia Ivy, followed by Magic Aldana, and then Melanie Romrell.
Hello, members of the board. You just heard my two children. They both have autism, and Jonathan also has ADHD. I am one of the few parents in ESA who can actually say, I've been through the public school system. I am also autistic with ADHD. However, due to the gaps that was in diagnosing women with autism and ADHD when I was a child, I was labeled a behavioral problem. My nickname from teachers and other students was Spaz. I have an IQ that's over 150. However, I struggled in the public school system. When COVID hit, my children were both enrolled in public schools, and I, along with their teachers, worked diligently to help them. However, when COVID happened, it was made very apparent that my children were struggling, and although they are both very intelligent, both of my children have over 140 IQs as well. And although they are both very intelligent, the public school system did not meet their needs. My children were deemed too high functioning for services in public school when COVID hit. I was told that I needed to be a team player and that my children were functioning high enough that they no longer needed the help. My children, now utilizing ESA, are able to meet all their needs with therapists who are geared specifically to them. My children have significant amounts that have rolled over because I utilize ESA as a parent, very conscientious of the funds that we are using. There are many parents like me. It is making it very hard to get my children even reading books. My children read like other people eat. My son, Jonathan, can read anywhere from 3 to 12 books in a week. And it is very hard to have to write a curriculum that has to list every single book he would like to read. I feel that the board and those who oversee ESA understand the importance of books as educational items. Why are they needing to have curriculum? Same thing with calculators. Those should be an automatic approval. Please, as a board, make ESA a priority because you cannot afford to build schools that will hold 75,000 more students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next is Magic Aldana, followed by Melanie Romrell, and then Kathy Visser.
Good morning. Good morning, members of the Arizona State Board of Education. My name is Magic Perry, and I'm 9 years old, and I'm here today because I want to share with you some of my frustrations with the ESA program. I know ESA is supposed to help kids like me get the best education possible, but sometimes it feels like it's doing the opposite. I love learning. I really do. But there are so many things I need for school that I always can't get right away, even when my parents want to buy them for me. Sometimes my parents hesitate to order things like educational books or supplies because they have to wait so long to get reimbursed. It takes forever, and I'm the one who has to go without while we wait. I don't understand why something that's supposed to help kids learn makes it so difficult to get the tools I need. One time, for science, I really wanted new workbooks about learning about the weather, and my mom said we had to wait because the reimbursement takes a long time. But at the time we got them, I was already behind on some of my science assignments, and it doesn't feel fair that I have to wait weeks or even months for things that could help me right now. just want to be able to learn without all these delays. What's even more frustrating is that ESA asks for a curriculum or explanation for the most obvious school items like pens, erasers, colored pencils. I mean, we all know that these things are basic supplies for school. Why do we need to prove that? Without them, how am I supposed to do my assignment? How am I supposed to create or draw if I don't have the colored pencils I need? It makes no sense to me, and it makes things harder for my parents and me. I'm not here to complain just to complain. I'm asking for things to change. I'm asking for you to make it easier for parents to get the supplies we need without all these delays. It shouldn't take weeks to get reimbursed for something like a workbook or art supply, and please, don't make parents jump through hoops just to get simple things like pencils and crayons approved. Thank you for listening to me today. I hope you'll take my frustration seriously because kids like me just want to be able to learn without all these unnecessary delays. Thank you for your time.
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn. Members of the board, up next is Melanie Romroll, followed by Kathy Visser, and then Alicia Marshall.
I'm here today because I don't want my child or any others to become a statistic. Let me explain. 2 of my children have ADHD, and the third has an autoimmune disease that keeps her from attending high volume schools. Statistically, as of 2022, 7 million children between the ages of 3 to 17 have been diagnosed with ADHD. Several studies have shown that 25% of those 7 million children become addicts of drugs or alcohol. Statistics also show that behavior issues affect ADHD the most, especially within a classroom. The second is mental health, such as anxiety and depression. Suicide in ADHD youth, it's 5 times more likely to happen. We experience behavioral problems with our oldest despite medicating him for ADHD, several other intervention methods, including a 504 plan. I was called or emailed daily for 4 years about what my child did do or did not do that did not fit the public school ideal outline and structure. That took its toll on me emotionally and mentally. Exhausting to have your child fit into an environment that did not fit him. I realized it was also not fair for his teacher and peers to keep him in an environment that was too overstimulating and hard for him to focus in. He was the disruption in a public school environment. My child became the child that no teacher wanted in their classroom. It just didn't work for him, and we chose for those other children's consideration and their education along with the teacher and the stress that it gave to them to pull our child from public school. That being said, my child has been homeschooled for the last 4 years, and now he has been able to thrive and become his best self. He is currently doing high school level core subjects in 8th grade. He just started flight classes as his goal is to become a Navy pilot and then move on to a commercial career. He has these opportunities made possible through ESA program. My child and others are at risk for being put back into an environment that are toxic to them through the long wait times and vendors being paid and more than 30 days of reimbursements being paid back. You're putting these children that are into a different environment that doesn't work for them and again at risk. The actions of those involved with groups that are against ESA and trying to dismantle making learning materials and resources hard for
Ms.
me
Rommel?
financially.
It's been 2 minutes. Would you be able to conclude your remarks?
I have like this much.
Just wrap it up very quickly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hard for me financially with other families, along with the 7 other million affected by ADHD. The slogan of Save Our Schools rings loud and clear that you care more about putting money into a system that's a one size doesn't fit all than saving my child.
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Kathy Visser, followed by Carly Bass and Julie Batt.
Good morning, Board of Education, Superintendent Horn. I'm an ESA parent. My name is Kathy Visser. I'm also a certified teacher and a public school supporter who's utilized this ESA program since 2011. I am very grateful for this program and the ability to come before the board, as for years we've had no voice in this program. I appreciate all the work that SBE does do and how supportive the SBE has been over the years, especially when we first came under you guys. It was just a wonderful experience to protect the ESA program for parents and the students who use the program. However, this last spring, the SBE did not follow through with the appropriate revisions in the handbook this last year. The handbook is supposed to be a guide for families in the proper use of ESA funding. Right now, the handbook is severely out of date, and the many super secret rules parents are now trying to guess how to navigate. The problems are exacerbated by staff not being consistent on the application of the rules that are expressly spelled out in statute, or even the new super secret rules, as we are constantly hoop jumping trying to figure out how to follow them. Parents will seriously put in the same thing for different children and have one thing approved and another one disapproved for the identical items. And this is a very consistent problem. I see posts about this constantly. The board does have the authority to open the handbook process and fix it now, with the extreme changes being randomly enforced. It is time to open the process now to be able to hash out the necessary changes that need to be updated this coming spring. It is time to finally get this document right. Every year it gets a little better, but this year it's just gone back to being a big fat disaster. So parents and ESA staff have a reliable guide to understanding how to appropriately use these ESA funds. I also find it disheartening that the SBE ruled against their own advisor in an appeals process, not once but twice, setting the tone for an outrageous media disinformation campaign against the ESA program, against a parent I know takes the purchases seriously and the education for children very seriously.
Ms. Visser, will you wrap it up?
Okay.
Thank you.
Part of the requirements in place for the ESA department is to have a published approved purchase list. There are many items that should be approved without requiring to have a ridiculous amount of documentation. That should be just on a list of approved items, such as calculators and reading books and things. I personally have like a list of 20 books I've got to write a curriculum for sitting, and
I think
also a
if you
graphing
can wrap it
calculator.
up, that would be great. Thank you.
So thank you. I do appreciate the opportunity to speak about this, and
Thank
I
you so
appreciate
much.
your attention. Thank you.
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Carly Bays, followed by Julie Batt, and then Simone Bell.
Carly, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for allowing me to attend virtually, and good morning, Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, and members of the board. I speak for my daughter who has autism. She was diagnosed at an early age and was nonverbal. We tried public school, but with limited special education and failing IEPs, my daughter was lost. She did not thrive. She did not learn. She did not enjoy life. When I found out about ESA, I felt like we hit the jackpot. She's now at a private school that, as a single, hardworking parent, I would not be able to afford on my own. This school customizes her learning and provides different therapies to guide her to success in learning, success in relationship building with other students, and success in life. She's now a verbal and active participant in her school, from donating her time to serving others and participating in school extracurricular activities. And she's proud to show her school spirit. I now have the opportunity to look towards a brighter future rather than the possibility of a group home, as I was told early on. Without this program, she would not thrive, she would not learn, she would not excel. The challenges as an ESA parent that I've heard from other parents and their children is a lag in payments for reimbursements for tuition, which is resulting me in having to pay late fees on top of trying to pay for tuition. Those late fees come out of my own pocket. Any attempts at requesting further information remain unanswered until I'm notified that a payment is approved. In prior years, I was getting responses. I'm no longer getting responses. I understand the program is severely understaffed, but this is causing parents to be viewed as unfavorable with admissions and finance departments. What does this do when we're trying to register for each year? And the anxiety that we feel in the possibility of not being able to utilize this program, especially when it's seen in a poor light, whether it's the media or lawmakers. Thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it.
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Julie Batt, followed by Simone Bell, and then Brandy Blackford.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Julie Batt, and I've been an ESA parent for many years. I've lost a lot of confidence in my ability to make ESA purchases that are allowable since Superintendent Horn took office last year, though. I follow the handbook, the law, the rules to the best of my ability, but there's an ever increasing amount of secret rules I keep discovering. Last month, the majority of this board voted against the hearing officer's decision in an ESA appeal for the first time ever. Not only did the department approve that parent's purchase 3 times as an allowable expense, but the hearing officer also said she followed all the rules. But it appears this board let their personal opinions regarding the educational validity of the purchase influence their vote. And now I've also lost my confidence in the appeal process, which was meant to provide consistency and protect parents from the personal whims of the ever-changing ESA administration. I'm sure you've all seen the recent outcry about buying flat earth curriculum. If I buy a creation-based science curriculum, what's to stop the department from coming after me with another secret rule? And if I have to appeal, and the majority of this board believes in evolution, what confidence do I have that the board won't vote against me as well? I voted for Superintendent Horn because I thought he would bring more stability and help the program run smoothly. I thought the board followed their own rules and was supportive of parents' role in their children's education. ESAs were designed to empower families, but I am feeling anything but empowered these days. Thank you for letting me speak.
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Simone Bell, followed by Brandy Blackford, and then Roxy Daggett.
Esteemed members of the board, I am Simone Bell, parent of a special education student participating in the Education Savings Account ESA program. My child has been homeschooled since kindergarten due to specific educational requirements. Until the 2022-2023 academic year, my son was enrolled in a public K-12 online school, which accurately met his needs. Following unforeseen circumstances that adversely impacted my child's education, I was forced to change plans and I was introduced to the ESA program, which initially appeared to be an ideal solution. We are currently in our 2nd year of ESA participation. However, what began as a promising opportunity has developed into a challenging experience fraught with administrative complexities. While the first year of ESA was efficient and user-friendly, this year we face burdensome curriculum requirements and protracted approval processes. Even when orders are finally approved, they are often subsequently canceled by vendors due to price and fluctuations or inventory issues. This necessitates reinitiating the entire process, resulting in average wait times exceeding 1 to 1.5 months for basic educational supplies. These delays have significant financial implications. Currently, the ESA owes me over $1,000 for tutoring services provided to my autistic child. As a result, I have exhausted my personal funds and can no longer afford to provide my child with the crucial educational support he requires. This situation is detrimental to my child's academic growth. Therefore, I respectfully request this board to include a dedicated agenda item at the
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Brandy Blackford, followed by Roxy Daggett, and then Miranda Grant.
Hello, Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, and members of the board. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Brandy Blackford. I am the mom to 3 amazing ESA students, one of which has severe dyslexia and wouldn't have survived, let alone thrived, in the public school system. I am beyond thankful for what ESA has allowed me to provide for my children. However, recent changes to the program have made educating burdensome, ineffective, and extremely difficult to accomplish. While I am blessed to be able to buy items via reimbursement, floating those funds for 8+ weeks as of last Friday is becoming difficult, especially as those purchases incur interest that is not reimbursable. There is a known glitch in the system between ClassWallet and ESA that removes curriculum that must be uploaded for marketplace items, causing additional work for both the parents as well as the ESA staff. Marketplace orders are also taking 4 to 6 weeks to approve, causing most orders to be rejected at the end of that time because of price changes, resulting in more delays to educating our children. There are also numerous items that are now blocked with no explanation given, items like books, glue sticks, STEM and STEAM kits. Vendors that have been signed up as direct pay vendors are leaving or are no longer accepting direct pay due to the length of time for approval and payout. There are secret and subjective lists of documents, rules for purchases, and approvals that are causing chaos for both families and employees of ESA. The call center is more often than not unable to handle the call volume, emails go unanswered, and there is no recourse for in-person meetings. Please consider reissuing debit cards to provide equal access to funds. Please consider adding additional staff to the department, and please retrain the existing staff on the processes and procedures. Thank you very much for your time.
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Roxy Daggett, followed by Miranda Grant, and then Tina Huntsman.
Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, my name is Roxy Daggett, and I live in Sedona, Arizona. I'm a parent who is home educating my child thanks to Arizona's ESA program. My son is a preschool student with various disabilities, including Down syndrome, hearing loss, and visual impairment. Due to his medically complex history, ESA is the safest and best way to provide my son with a robust education. Thanks to ESA, we're able to pursue an at-home early literacy and math program. We're learning American Sign Language and Spanish as second and third languages. We work with highly trained therapists, including an ASL fluent speech pathologist and more. These are opportunities that wouldn't be afforded my son in a local public school program. My son is bright and loves to learn, but I must tell you, since the ESA program changes of July 2024, the flow of my son's education has slowed down. As a former public school teacher, I am no stranger to curriculum and lesson plans and have often enjoyed writing them. However, as a home educating parent of a child with disabilities, the task of writing, locating, or editing a curriculum when I need something as simple as crayons, printer paper, reading books, or dictionaries has become burdensome. I now find myself using precious lesson planning time and staying up late to create curricula. Even with all the technology available to us, it still takes considerable time to organize a purchase or reimbursement. Once I've finally found time to organize supplemental materials into a curriculum, I have to wait for an approval, which is taking longer than usual. I have a backlog of learning materials I need for my son's education. Our family time, our sleep schedules, which is our health, and our pace of learning are compromised due to this extra workload. I'm sad that our state's attorney general has targeted the ESA program, weighing the staff down with countless tasks and pressuring them to place extra requirements on parents. ESA families are being excessively burdened, and our kids, our students, are paying the price with delays to their education and missed learning opportunities as the academic year marches on. I'm sad to see families struggling and even leaving the program due to the stress this is causing. We respectfully ask those who can help to please push back against these onerous requirements and free the ESA staff and program to function for the children's best interests as soon as possible. Thank you for your time.
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next is Miranda Grant, followed by Tina Huntsman, and then Harmony Lurley.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
I would like to start by thanking you for letting me speak today. ESA has been a life changer for our children. We had 7 students in the public school system. While in public school, 2 of them were in and out of mental health hospitals, struggled with depression, anxiety, as well as identity issues. They were exposed to inappropriate behavior by school staff that was not resolved. They were exposed to vaping and dangerous narcotics. Almost all of them struggled academically, and a few were exposed to violent assaults of students by other students up to 2 times weekly. I agree that while public school isn't an option for everyone, it should be a great place for those who would like to attend. I would love to see equal amounts of accountability and support put into public schools as ESA. Having school choice and the ability to school them at home has resulted in a huge improvement in social emotional skills and mental health for all of them. The lowest grade any of them have currently is a B-, and they have been volunteering their time out in the community with the time saved by schooling at home. Keeping them in public school was absolutely not sustainable. ESA has helped so many families to be able to have choices about how and where to school their children. It has probably saved many students from suicidal ideations. The only issue we're having is the timeliness of reimbursements and order approvals. We prioritize education and have used credit to buy computers, online curriculum, and supplies needed for note-taking and studying so that we could begin on time. But some of our marketplace orders from first quarter have not even been reviewed, and we are almost at second quarter. In conclusion, I understand the need for review and accountability of where the funds are going. I just ask that in addition to properly staffing the team that reviews the orders, perhaps expedite common sense orders such as books, pens, paper, calculators, and laptops. Thank you so much for your time.
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Tina Huntsman, followed by Harmony Lurley, and then Amanda M.
Hi, my name is Tina Huntsman. I educate my 4 children at home. They have been ESA recipients for the past 2 years. Since July, when significant changes were made to the ESA program, my ESA students and I have experienced significant challenges. Hours spent writing curricula for inherently educational items that should not require a curriculum, like pencils, pens, paper, and books. Such items, especially books, should automatically be approved. Writing useless curricula to justify their purchase and use in my kids' education is a tedious task and a huge time waster that detracts from the quality of my kids' educational experience. We've also experienced untrained or ill-trained staff who seem to be fond of issuing automatic rejections rather than critically evaluating and processing reimbursement requests. Items get denied even though the handbook does not list them as disallowed. Parent handbook provides no useful information for parents, so we end up wasting our time finding an educational product, writing curriculum for it, and submitting curriculum only to find out months later that it was not approved because of an employee arbitrarily denied it as disallowed. Emails and phone calls that go unanswered by staff for weeks. ESA is woefully understaffed and is completely unreachable via phone or email. Let me focus on 4 ways that I think we could improve the program. Items that are actionable today. Number 1, work with the legislature to revise the statutes to automatic approval of books and school supplies. 2, prioritize a comprehensive revision to the parent handbook so parents don't have to constantly guess what employees will require on any given day for any given purchase. 3rd, hire more staff and train them better so families don't have to wait for months for news of reimbursements. And 4th, place ESA as an agenda item on next month's school board meeting agenda. Before I conclude, I'd like to comment on recent articles in Arizona-based newspapers. A handful of biased, shallow, poorly researched articles have complained about the amount of money sitting unspent in ESA accounts. They insinuate that ESA families are hoarding funds. Let me be clear. All we want to do as ESA recipient families is provide quality, tailored educational opportunities for our children, but we're in an impossible situation right now. Our accounts are funded and we are spending our own money on essential educational materials, but with reimbursements taking on average 8 or more weeks to be approved, we are simply unable to spend the funds that empower our students to learn. I respectfully request that you take action by placing ESA on the agenda for next month.
Thank you.
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next is Harmony Lurley, followed by Amanda M., and then Rebecca Mohammed. Harmony, are you with us?
It looks like she's online and she's able to speak, but she might be having some issues connecting her microphone because it's unmuted, but we can't hear her.
I'll go to the next speaker and then we'll circle back. So up next would be Amanda M. And Miss Lurley, we'll circle back to you.
Hello, thank you so much for having me today. I'm here today to plead for improvements with the ESA program, as many of the families that you're hearing from are. Recent changes have caused a 3-month backlog in reimbursements. New rules have been implemented but not communicated to parents, and the allowable list has been removed from the website. There are thousands of students who rely on this program because traditional public schools were unable to meet their basic needs, and the changes have made it unusable for many families. You've heard from many brave kids this morning who have talked about how it has personally impacted them. Please help them.
Amanda, does that conclude your public comment?
It does, and I
Okay.
would be happy to donate my time to someone else who needs to run over.
Thanks, Amanda. Is Miss Lurley, why don't we try again? We're still not hearing you, Miss Lurley. We're going to go to the next speaker. We'll try one more time. We'll circle back. So Rebecca Mohammed. Rebecca, are you with us?
Hi, Rebecca, I can see your hand is up and it looks like you're unmuted, but I can't hear you.
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, my recommendation would be let's move to the consent agenda. We have another call to the public after that, and we'll see if we're able to hear those folks in that next call to the public.
Sounds great. Do we have the balance of the names that are listed also?
We do, yes.
Okay, great.
So Vice President Haley, that concludes this call to the public. The other folks who had signed up have not joined us at this time.
Okay, great. And for those that are having technical difficulty, we'll try to have them during the item number 4. So with that, we'll now move to item 3. This is the consent agenda. Is there an item for the consent agenda that a board member would like to pull and discuss? And if there's anybody on the screen from our team, this is the time we'll want to turn our screens on. And at the time for a vote, we will, we'd love to see you all. So, okay, seeing that nobody has an item to approve, do I have a motion to approve items 3A through 3C?
So moved.
Member Kravickas, anybody a second?
Second.
Dr. Clay, great. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, moving on to item number 4. Well, now this is the second call to a public. This is a time for the public to comment on items on today's general session. All speakers will be limited to 2 minutes. Director Ross, have we received any requests to speak?
I'm not sure yet if we can hear them, but James Francis is ready to speak.
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up first is James Francis, followed by Mary Ann Martin, and then Michael Sandifer.
Good morning, Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, and members of the board. My name is Dr. James Francis, and I am the Superintendent for AmeriSchools Academy. I'm here today to speak regarding accountability cut scores and letter grades for Arizona Public Schools, specifically to address the discrepancies created by the current models of these school letter grades that disproportionately affect small schools and non-standard models. For the purposes of my comments today, I am focusing on AmeriSchools Yuma schools. Both of our Yuma schools are K-6 schools with enrollment under 200. As of last week, Yuma North has a total enrollment of 195, but only 83 will be represented in state testing this school year. Yuma South has a total enrollment of 112, and only 58 are represented in state testing. I was incredibly concerned to see the preliminary scores in my district, specifically the scores of our Yuma schools. In school year 22-23, Yuma North received an A rating and Yuma South received a B rating due to their growth scores. However, as a direct result of the calculations in the current K-8 model, both schools will potentially see a 1 or 2 letter grade decrease due to the impossibility of long-term high growth sustainability. The current K-8 model does not accurately reflect the performance of small schools and schools outside the K-8 model, despite being held accountable to it. As an example, since our Yuma schools are K-6, we cannot earn any bonus points from grade 8 performance as we do not have a grade 8. Small schools also become ineligible for many of the subgroup bonus points simply due to their small enrollment. Small schools are effectively penalized and prevented from sustaining long-term higher grades explicitly as a result of the blanket K-8 school model that does not represent who we are as a school. It also means that small schools' performances end up resting with just a few teachers at a time. Without intervention or understanding, one of our schools may receive a score 2 letter grades below what they earned last year due to this discrepancy, despite having scores in several areas that might prevent it. The State Board of Education and the Arizona Department of Education have a professional responsibility to address this matter with all due expediency for the benefit of all students in the state of Arizona by developing a scoring model that can accurately and fairly represent small schools and small districts across Arizona so all schools can enjoy a level of stability as the larger schools and districts. I sincerely hope we can look forward to and expect additional developments that support Arizona's smaller schools. Thank you for your time.
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board.
We can try to.
We're going to try one more time here for our 2 folks from the previous call to the public. If we're unable to hear them, Melissa's going to reach out via email, have them submit their comment in a written format, which will be shared with the board. But let's give it one more try here. So we're going to try Harmony Lurley first.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can, yes, thank you.
Great, thank you for your patience. Esteemed members of the board, I am so very thankful for the ESA. Unfortunately, the way that the current program is being administered has made it almost unusable for many families. Constant sweeping changes have made the parent handbook irrelevant. Now a set of super secret rules on price limits, acceptable and unacceptable purchases, and item sizes are paralyzing the use of funds for educational endeavors. Purchases that are clearly outlined as acceptable in the handbook are now secretly, as in not communicated anywhere, being denied, and parents utilizing reimbursements are not being reimbursed. Those with debit cards will be told retroactively that they must repay costs for an item that is allowable in the handbook, and there are no guarantees that the appeals process will be applied fairly or by the rules. This is no way to run a program. If the department wants to put limits in place, the legality of several of these limits being questionable per the statute, they must clearly communicate to parents what the new rules are. How ridiculous is it for a parent to order something for their child's education that is acceptable in the handbook, only to be told it will not be reimbursed or approved because it was a few inches over a secret, super secret size limit, or a few dollars or more over a super secret price limit known only to the staff and leadership of ESA. This is no way to run a program. All the uncertainty paralyzes parents and hinders their children's education. We deserve and demand transparency. Please, please start making and clearly communicating choices that are in the student's best interest and actually empower parents instead of discouraging, demoralizing, and penalizing them.
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, we're going to go ahead and try Rebecca Mohammed.
Hi, Rebecca. I can see that you're unmuted, but we still can't hear you. I'm going to have to reach out to you after the meeting. I'll send you an email so you can provide your written comment.
Thank you, Melissa. Have Mary Ann Martin, excuse me, or Michael Sanderford joined us for that second call to the public? No. Okay. Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, that concludes this call to the public.
Okay, great. We will now move to item 5A, Executive Director Ross. I should also note this is for our information.
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, as happens every year in September, we have Sean Smith, the Chief Accountability Officer from the Arizona Department of Education, coming to present on proposed cut scores for the A-Ref accountability system for the 23-24 school year. Just as a reminder to board members of the calendar for the general calendar for A-F, the A-F technical advisory committees, of which we have 3, meet every month, actually quite often more than once a month, especially in the run-up to cut scores and with indicator scoring coming as we discussed last month. The 3 technical advisory committees, we have a traditional technical advisory committee that covers K-12, an alternative school technical advisory committee, and then an AOI technical advisory committee. All 3 of those have made recommendations for cut scores, which Sean will discuss today in his presentation. As a reminder, this is for information only. Sean will come back and join us in October, and you all will vote on cut scores in October. The Monday meeting in October is October 21st. The board then, per statute, has until November 1st to release letter grades, though usually Sean and his team are excellent, and it usually happens the Friday after the board meeting. So we're sort of, I'm writing a check with Sean's time. We're assuming it will happen that Friday as well. And then letter grades will be released, and then schools will have until November 15th to file for an appeal of their letter grade with the board. Appeals will be reviewed by our appeals committee, which very huge thank you to Member Meyerson, Dr. Clay, and Dr. Hagerman for making up that committee each of the last few years. And then those appeals will be voted on by the board in the January board meeting. So just a quick snapshot. This is probably a very familiar calendar to you by now, but Sean will come and discuss cut scores and recommendations from the technical advisory committees.
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, thank you for having me with you today. And excuse me, happy to be here to speak about the proposed cut scores. For most of you, it's going to be pretty familiar. Can we jump right into the next slide there? So as we've seen in years past, the overall number of grades allocated, if we look at each of the models, remain most consistent if we adopt the prior year cut scores. So these cut scores have remained consistent, and the general thinking behind that has been to preserve stability and consistency, establish long-term data, and set those levels of comparison so that schools can know essentially where they're at and where they're going each year. In general, we've explored the standard deviation approach when there's been a change to the system. And so this year we have had no changes to the system. Last time we did that was in 2022 when we adopted new state tests for high school. And so we set new cut scores for high school. But what you're seeing here, and we'll see a similar graphic for each of the models, K-8, 912, and then alternative 912. And what you can kind of see is that the bars in black, those are the actual 2023 grades that were awarded last year. The bars in red are what we would have if we were to maintain those same cut scores. And then the bars in purple are what would happen if we were to use the standard deviation to kind of reset those to a new norm. As you can see, what happens in red, and this will be a trend that we see on pretty much every model, the number of schools earning each letter grade remains very similar using the prior year cut scores. And anytime we apply that standard deviation cut, it does kind of what we would expect it to do, right? It recenters everything around that BC line. And what we've seen over the past few years is that average scores have been increasing and the variability has been decreasing. In other words, schools across the state are becoming more consistent and in general performing higher on the model. So when we recenter that around there, it kind of smushes everything back toward the middle. Smushes is the technical term. Can you tell I have young kids at home? So we'll take a quick look here at the 912 model next. We can kind of see the same trend. So again, we see very similar results in general. And then on alternative, what was interesting here is we see a slight decrease in the number of A's. Alternative Technical Advisory Committee looked at this and said, they looked at the data and felt like this was representative of what was happening out there. So the overall trend remains the same, even though there is that slight decrease in A schools. And then I think next we have recommendations. Again, so rationale for maintaining the prior year cut scores as a recommendation from the technical advisory committees was to keep those clear targets that everyone's kind of expecting, especially in the context of the upcoming indicator scoring that we're going to be adopting. Maintaining that as much as possible will give us a good on-ramp as we move into indicator letter grade scoring. This slide just shows where those cut points are at, primarily as a reference for members of the field and public who are looking at this to kind of see where that would be if we were to adopt the prior year cut scores. And then we'll go to the next slide. These are visuals that we've found helpful in the past, and what we say, nice for, interior decorating if you wanted to print one out to hang on the wall. But what we see here, two things that we see with these. Although we see the landscape remaining very similar in the previous slides, we have roughly the same number of A's, B's, C's, and D's each year. What we see is that the schools that are in those categories are not necessarily the same schools from every year. We see changes, although we see stability for the goals, we see schools are able to move amongst those groups, right? And so I always recommend people kind of squint their eyes and look at this one. And as you can see, like some of the movements, it remains fairly unchaotic, right? Like we see places, schools moving from one bracket to another. It was kind of fun at the assessment conference this last week. I was able to talk to one of the schools that had moved from a D to a B. I was like, hey, we were celebrating, like, wow, look at what's happening there. And she talked about the good things that they'd done with their change in leadership, the intervention programs that they'd put in place. And so this is always encouraging to see that, although the overall results remain very similar, schools are able to put practices in place that help them move between categories and see improvements with their programs. And then do we have one on standard deviation? Is that the next one? Well, this is the same thing for the 912 model. So this is looking at the 912 model. If we were to apply prior year cuts, again, for the most part, we see a great level of stability. We see a large number of B's moving to A's, a few A's moving to B's, some C's moving to B's. But in general, most things remaining fairly stable. And then I think next is the alternative. So again, quite a significant amount of stability, but we do see some schools moving between categories. This is analysis that we do each year. By we, I mean Yason, let's be honest. But an important part of what we look at is we try and determine how this is affecting different types of schools to see if there's any major discrepancy between systematically between the different school types and configurations or populations that they serve. What you want to really see on these charts, it's showing the percentage of each that's kind of moving where we to change. And so on the left, you can kind of see where grades would move if we were to apply standard deviation cuts. So you can see more C's, D's, and F's. Prior year cuts leads to more A's and B's. The real important thing to determine between the different school types. So here we're looking at charter and district. You want to see the different color lines for each grade band going the same direction. In other words, we'd want to say that for either approach, it's going to have the same impact on both charter and district schools. So we want both of those kind of colored lines going. So as we see here with charter and district, they both go in the same direction with either of the approaches that we take. And then the next one, go next slide there. Oh, I'm sorry. As this one we put in as kind of an exemplar in the full meeting materials, we've got each of these analyses for different things like small schools, AOIs, et cetera, that can be reviewed. But just as a note on how to kind of look at those and interpret those. All right, now I'm ready for the next one. And with that, I'm available for any questions.
Do we have any questions from the board, either online or here in person? Member Krivickas.
Hi, Sean.
Hey.
Thank you. And I do want to give a shout out to all the volunteers on all those technical assistance committees. I've sat in on a few over the years, and it's a lot of work, a lot of brain work. I will just raise the same issue I've raised last year. My understanding is one of the board priorities from previous boards was that every school could become an A. But my understanding, which seriously is not, mathematically lacking, understandably, is that given the fact that we continue to use standard deviations, it seems like we're still seeking a bell curve, which means by default, not every school can be an A. And I appreciate the movement, but the numbers are not, which you can see in your charts. I just want to throw that out there because I think, especially when we're moving, obviously, to a whole new system, that's why I don't want to make any kind of recommendation because I know we're having this huge lion's share change, this huge lion's share. But I just want to point that out, that every school can't be an A.
Member Krivickas, Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, Member Krivickas. So we're actually not, the recommendation is to not use the standard deviation model. It's to use the prior year. But you are right in that if the recommendation were to use standard deviation, it would retrofit every school to a bell curve for the year, and it would not allow every school to get an A. And it's actually part of the thinking of not using that system, except when there's been a major change in the inputs, like a new assessment, because then there does need to be a recalibration. So under the prior year recommendation from the technical advisory committees, every school does have the opportunity to earn an A.
But I probably misspoke, which I didn't mean the standard deviation model. I meant the fact that my understandings were using, I don't want to dwell this long, but unless you can talk to me offline, but this has been the second year and my understanding of the way I thought using standard deviations to distinguish between an A, B, and C, even with the prior year cuts is, because the numbers remain the same. Generally there's a bell curve on either one. I understand the policy implications between the three, but it just doesn't seem to me possible because it's not a criterion reference model. It's not like this is what we expect in A. It's a bell curve.
Oh. So Member Krivickas, Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. I think you hit on a really good point. As Sean mentioned, anytime we kind of set a normative measure, you have that impact that there's going to potentially be, there always needs to be somebody on the bottom. And I think as you've highlighted, one of the challenges that we've faced in the system and that we're hoping to address with indicator scoring is how do we kind of set goals for each of those that let people move further and further, right? As Sean mentioned, the recommendation being to use those prior year cut scores to ameliorate some of that issue, but I think we want to continue down that road and look for improvements to open those doors further as we kind of move with indicator scoring. But yes, you're right on track.
Thank you. And I don't claim to have a psychometric solution to this dilemma, and I'll leave it to the ATEX, but I just think as a board, it's important for us since that is one of our stated priorities. And if the policy is to continue with the strategies for calculations now, and I'm trying to say this, I think we just have to acknowledge that it doesn't. Now, I mean, there's pros and cons to both of those, but I just think we need to have an honest conversation about that at some point.
Do we have any other questions? Member Meyerson.
Thank you. Hi, Sean. Thanks for all of your work on this and excited to participate in the appeals committee again this year. One of the reflections that I think as a committee we've also had, and I know is just kind of shared from as a deep commitment from you and your team, is as much as possible trying to sort of rectify things prior to the public release so that as things are communicated to the public, it's truly the correct as best as we can. And obviously no system is perfect, but as best as possible, the sort of we're communicating about that school as best as we can and the correct response. Can you talk a little bit about the work that your team is doing to ensure that we're getting as close, and whether it's to the reference from the public comment earlier around small schools, et cetera, maybe just talk a little bit about the work you and your team are doing to, as best as possible before we publicly release those letter grades, work to address that.
Absolutely. Member Meyerson, Vice President Haley, and Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Thank you. And yes, that's something we've been highlighting to the field in particular. It's been great these last few years working with the board and the appeals committee and the board staff. We've got a few years of appeals committee under our belt. It's been really positive conversations where schools have been able to call in and as was mentioned in the public comment, sometimes we're not even eligible for the full 10 points if they did everything perfectly. And so we're able to have those discussions. We meet every couple of weeks with the board staff here, and we kind of look over those and see what do we know from previous appeals that we're able to kind of move forward on those. Where can we look at the math and see what it's telling us? A lot of the conversations, sometimes we'll talk about, special education inclusion. So when we get a number back that says 9.367, like what does that mean in terms of human children? Like was one kid only sticking their hands into the classroom 80% of the time? And so we try, and it's been a really positive thing to talk about, to work with schools and talk about, are we meeting the intent, not just adhering stubbornly to the letter of the business rules, but when the math is kind of, the math gives us a direction, and then we've relied on the wisdom and discretion of the board and the appeals committee to kind of see where we can move on those. So, Superintendent or Director Ross likes to say a lot of times, once those letter grades come out, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. And so it's been real positive to work with schools to try and get that initial release right, so they're not trying to have to put things back. So.
Any other questions? Anybody, any of our members joining us virtually? Do you have any questions? Okay, well, thank you so much for your presentation today. We look forward to the materials you'll share with us in October. Thank you. With that, we will take a break probably toward the top of the hour. So just for context, we'll now move to item 5B, Executive Director Ross.
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have a presentation from the Arizona Department of Education on proportionate share funding, especially as related to special education. So with us today will be Chris Brown and Colette Chapman from the Arizona Department of Education.
And members of the board. Today, we will be talking about proportionate share and equitable services for students with disabilities. Next slide, please. Yeah. Here's our agenda. We will be discussing equitable services, school district consultation, responsibilities of the districts, and options available to nonprofit private schools, monitoring, and fiscal. Next slide, please. So what is proportionate share? Proportionate share refers to a portion of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, funding school districts must spend on parentally placed private school students with disabilities. Under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, school districts must provide parentally placed private schools with an opportunity to participate in equitable services funded with IDEA Part B funds. And the proportionate amount comes from the IDEA Part B funds and the 3 to 5 funds. Chris.
Next slide, please. Thank you. So when proportionate share is determined, the school district has a responsibility to do counts within their boundaries, particularly at private elementary and secondary schools, which there's a slide later on that clarifies also includes homeschooled families in the state of Arizona. So Arizona is a little unique in that law. Now, there is the denominator here, the verbiage is transposed a little bit, so we'll have to send a revised presentation. But in the calculation is more or less a fraction. And in the numerator, it's the number of parentally placed eligible children with disabilities in private elementary and secondary schools within the school district boundaries. And in the denominator, it's the total amount of all eligible children of students with disabilities. So that's where it's a little bit different than what you see on this slide here. So for example, if there were 10 eligible students for special education attending private schools within the boundaries of the school district, and you had 90 kids enrolled with disabilities at the public school, your total of 90 plus 10 would be 100. So that'd be your denominator, and your numerator would be 10. So 10% in that example would have to go to proportionate share obligation, or what we call equitable services. Next slide, please. So parentally placed private children with disabilities, they are eligible to receive equitable services. This is the actual agreement, or what we call a service plan with the district. As I mentioned, it does include homeschool children. There's a specific revised statute where it clarifies that. Arizona is a little unique in that a lot of states do not have that law in existence, and it's only for private schools that are non-profit. So particularly that comes for the definition of elementary and secondary schools as defined by the, you could say, ESEA. And what is also unique about Arizona is that it's only kindergarten programs in 1st to 12th grade. So preschool is not in the definition of elementary and secondary schools in the state of Arizona. Now, also, there is no individual entitlement to special education and related services as if they were enrolled in a district. The service and agreement between the district and each individual eligible child that is parentally placed can look totally different, and comparing it to publicly enrolled children might be the same, but in most practical terms, it is not the same, and it can look just what's unique and what the district has the viability to offer for all the families in their community. And akin to that, children with disabilities that are placed by their parents in private schools, which includes homeschool, do not have all the protections under the IDEA. Next slide, please. So the consultation process does need to be timely and meaningful. It is a mandatory process. It should be ongoing throughout the year. It involves discussions between the school district, private school officials, and representatives of parentally placed private school children with disabilities when they design and develop the types of services to be offered in their community. Note, it does not mean individual consultation. It means when they're establishing the upfront, what they're looking at to serve the community, it's representatives. So it has to be an official representative of the private school or representatives of homeschool families within the boundaries of the district. Please note also, everything we talk about here right now requires boundaries of a school district, so it's not applicable to charters or the Arizona State School for the Deaf and Blind, which is also an eligible LEA for federal funds, or the Department of Corrections, of course, for jails and juveniles. Now, a unilateral offer of services by a school district who does not consult or have an opportunity for discussion does not meet the basic requirements. So if the LEA in this case, or the school district, just basically says we're going to do X, Y, and Z, but has no meaningful feedback from the community or just try to do any outreach, they would not be meeting the basic requirements. Once they discuss key issues relating to the provision of special education and related services, the district can make the final decision of what services are to be provided to the eligible students with disabilities that are parentally placed within their boundaries. So the district has more or less the final say in deciding, you could say, decision regards to what the services will look like in general for the school district and the boundaries.
Next slide, please. So with proportionate share, there are no guarantees. It is possible that some parentally placed students with disabilities will not receive equitable services. And the IDEA, again, provides no individual entitlement to special education related services that the student would receive if they were enrolled in a public school or placed in a private school by a school district through an IEP. And again, equitable services are not guaranteed for parentally placed students with disabilities. So next slide, please. Thank you. So options available to nonprofit private schools. If the private school disagrees with the district decision on who they're going to provide equitable services to, the LEA has to put in writing their reasons for their decision and an explanation. If the private school is dissatisfied, they can call the official of the district and try to work, discuss their dissatisfaction with them. Or formally, the private school official has a right to file a complaint with Exceptional Student Services that the district did not engage in consultation that was meaningful and timely, or did not give due consideration to the views of the private school official. And then if the private school is dissatisfied with the department's findings, they may go ahead and submit a complaint to the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Education. Next slide, please. So the Exceptional Student Services does monitor for proportionate share. So what we look at is we determine whether the district maintains a invitation list or an agenda for consultation meetings, or written affirmations signed by the representatives of participating private schools and homeschool families obtained by the districts. So that is what the department monitors for, to see if the district has moved through the process as required. Okay.
All right. So when it comes to spending proportionate share funds, if there's unspent funds at the end of the grant life cycle, so I'm going to hop to the bottom bullet, grant life cycle generally being 27 months to obligate expenditures. ADE can consider a school district's request to use funds on regular expenditures for the grant. So this would generally be what they use for all the kids enrolled in their district. These funds are tracked in general through completion reports in our grants management system. There's a separate earmarking for these types of expenditures for the grant. And the dollar amount for the first year that the grant is open. So when we talk about 27 months, that's 2 years of a grant, more or less. We call it 15 months plus 12 months. If they don't meet the requirement in the first year, that requirement continues to the second year. And then a new extra, you could argue, requirement comes on top of it. So it kind of layers on top of itself. I will share that some of the requests in the past we received in the department a fair amount during COVID, particularly because there was a lot of closures with private schools at the time, or just temporary closing due to the health issues, or just staff not showing up, et cetera. But practically, most of the time, when we get a request and we look at whether the funds can go back to regular funds, we look at things as the district like consulting with the representatives and the boundaries. And just an FYI, consultation generally aligns pretty much the exact same process to the ESEA. In fact, most districts in the state just make it the same as the ESEA. So ESEA normally, they'll do quarterly or up to 8 times a year. They'll do like a community night where they get the families to come in. They talk about all the things that the schools do. There is no requirement that the consultation for IDEA is anything significantly different than the ESEA. And it's probably pretty savvy if the district just overlaps them to particularly make sure they get a larger outreach from families in the community. So next slide, please. And I think that's questions.
Yeah. Do you have any questions for us? Comments?
I'm sure members of the board do. Do we have, for those that are online that would like to ask questions, please be ready. Dr. Clay is already ready to go.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the briefing. I just needed some clarification. You said community night, and that just sparked my ears. So is community night a strategy you can use in lieu of a meeting with all the representatives in the community? Just wanted to clarify that.
Sure. Vice President Haley, Superintendent, members of the board. To answer your question, Dr. Clay, it's one of the strategies. Most of the districts will usually do outreach to each of the private schools because in their boundaries anyways, because they're required to get information for October 1 data collection. It's a requirement to ensure that the allocation is calculated correctly. Now, what the private school gives the district is up to the private school. Some of them are very forthcoming. Some of them kind of don't want to hear from districts, and districts just have to make an effort to reach out. So hopefully that answers your question.
One more clarifying question. What are the best practices that you see in the state of Arizona in regard to this appropriate share?
Just to clarify, Dr. Clay, is it the use of funds or just the consultation part?
The consultation part.
A mix of both. Having a really good pulse, like with the diocese, for example, they're well informed on equitable services and the ESEA proportionate share. So I think both parties making an effort to contact each other. There's also a challenge that districts have every year because there's new private schools that open. And they don't necessarily, not like their first phone call is not to call the district, for example, and say, hi, we're open. But I think districts just keeping an awareness in general. There's some really technical strategies they can do, like looking at school zones with state agencies, for example. But it's practically pretty hard to expect school district staff at an entry level to look at those nuances. But I would say I'd resonate to two areas. The community nights is really well, where they do public postings, newspaper postings, social media nowadays. And the second aspect is contacting the private schools within their boundaries. You could say continuously, but quarterly is generally a good practice just to see a pulse of how things are going. A lot of the larger private schools will tend to talk to districts monthly. It's pretty common.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Other members, Member Krivakis.
First of all, thank you. Well, thank you for everything, but thank you for the clarification on the numerator and denominator. I thought I was losing my mind. I misread that sign like 10 times going, that is not my understanding. So thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, I had the privilege of meeting with Colette last week. I just finished a research project on this topic nationally, so I have some observations. And I interviewed as many school district special education directors and private schools as I could. I also looked at the data for 4 years, 4 different states. And there's still significant money left on the table in all states. Again, my comments are not Arizona unique. But of course, school choice is expanding. And that's why this is a hot topic. I find it so interesting that this has been in federal law for decades. Most people knew little to nothing about it until now. We have, in Arizona, 12,000 kids with disabilities on ESAs. It's becoming a hotter topic. I have so many things I want to say or ask, but one of the observations I made in all my interviews is you're right. There is, I didn't hear anybody call them community nights, but one of my concerns is there is a really decent understanding of the ESA side of it on the private schools, a little to no understanding of it on the IDA side. So I would probably advocate for be completely different, mainly because the topics they also need to discuss are different. Like on the IDA side, they're supposed to be talking about child find processes and how the paperwork's going to work and how the evaluations will flow. So that would be hard to do in IDEA. And most private schools are pretty small. There's some big ones, to Chris's point, that had different experiences because they're big, but most are not. And the people, I talked to private schools who were making an intentional effort to serve students with disabilities. So they had a quote SPED program. They don't call it special education, but kind of like that. Those people, the people that are running those programs were fairly disconnected from the people that are running ESA. So they weren't talking, like they didn't even know So, and there's lots of reasons for that. So I would probably strongly advocate for those to be totally separate processes. Now, the parent side is a little bit tougher. And Chris, you mentioned the representatives of parents. I looked and there's no federal guidance on that. Are we interpreting it that it can only be representatives, or can parents come as well? I mean, obviously community night parents would come, but specifically to the consultation process.
Members of the board, the guidance basically says representatives. So the way is an individual parent can't consult on behalf of all, from their perspective, for their family, would not be a representative of all homeschooled families. It's not to say that in very small districts, there might be one and the same if they have a population of 2 to 3 parentally placed families in the whole boundaries. But that's more or less what the regulation says. I mean, it was pretty much verbatim and put them up in the slide. But I don't view it as binary as that.
Okay. On the public school side, I talked to quite a few school districts, and as AD would know better than anybody, this administration of this program is a pretty small percent of all of their duties and everything they're trying to do. So in my report, most of the recommendations I make were really just about how can we increase transparency on both the school district side and the state department side, because the information is really hard to find. That's true of all states. Again, these are not Arizona unique comments. How can we facilitate access and strengthen the process? So some of the ideas I talked throughout there, I should say, one of which would be important to Dr. Clay is there a possibility, especially in rural areas, for county school superintendents to kind of organize these timely and meaningful consultations? Most of the school districts were offering pretty much the same types of services. The big ones were speech language, maybe some reading intervention. But if they're all in the same room together and for more than just 1 hour and actually able to share data with one another, meaning the private schools, they might find out, oh, that school on the other side of the county has 2 kids with a visual impairment. We have one too. And then they can start talking about pooling of resources. But when the conversations are more one-off. But again, I also want to stress that, everybody I talked to really enjoyed their relationships, which is why I told nobody wants to file a complaint, no matter how frustrated, because they're really trying to preserve those relationships with the school districts for lots of reasons, including the ESEA side. So I'll stop for a second and let other members.
Just one comment. The counties used to be more involved, but because they used to be required to take affidavits from homeschool families and children enrolled in, I think, private schools. But with when the ESA law was codified, families taking ESA funds are not required to put an affidavit to the county. So there's a huge, I think there was a frustration by the counties because this information was valuable to them. And now that the families don't have to notify, that whole data set, and I think I'm watching Dr. Clay nod her head, I think that caused a pretty big disconnect from the process at the time. Particularly, probably more so for the IDEA than the ESEA.
Well, and clearly, as you already discussed, the issues in urban Phoenix were dramatically different from what I heard in rural Arizona, where I talked to 2 school districts that had no private schools in their boundaries. So obviously, they're very different. Any other questions? Yes.
Thank you.
Member Clark.
Thanks. Yes, I asked for this to be added to the agenda, and I sent some questions back on July 2nd about proportionate share. So I want to give some context to some of the other board members about why this issue is important to me and why I asked for it to be placed on the agenda. My daughter has been a recipient of proportionate share equitable services. She could have been a recipient 5 years earlier than she was a recipient. And that's because even though in order to qualify for proportionate share equitable services, your child has to be identified in the school district. You have to have a document from the school district that they've gone through the evaluation process. And then a MET is provided. And then an ISP is written if you end up getting proportionate share services. We were never offered that. We were never even told, even though we went through that entire process. So even with this homeschool data set issue, districts know who has gotten evaluated, who is a private school student or who is a homeschool student in their boundaries. And my perception is that those families are not being told, hey, there's this big pot of money that is coming to the state of Arizona. That money is then calculated and distributed to the districts specifically for the use of students with disabilities who are at a private school or who are homeschooled. I'm equally concerned, and I know we're going to throw up some data, and I asked for data stuff, that it is my understanding that there are districts who have spent zero of these dollars. They know that they're there. They know that there's students with disabilities in their district boundaries. They've evaluated them, and yet the money is not being spent on those students with disabilities. In fact, in my own situation and many parents that I work with outside of this role, when parents have emailed the districts and asked, hey, I just heard about this thing called Proportionate Share Equitable Services. My student has autism or speech delay or ADHD or dyslexia. Can you tell me what the process is in order to qualify for those funds? In many cases, they're told, gee, I don't know what you're talking about. And then when we give them the information that you guys provide online, those PowerPoint presentations, which are phenomenal, then they're like, oh yeah, that, okay. Yeah, we can talk through about that. So I'm like sounding alarm bells. I'm extremely concerned. And the reason why I'm concerned is because the money is there. But after 27 months, if the money is not used for those students with disabilities, then they can apply for a waiver and use it somewhere else. So I want to walk through some of these questions. I know there was a data set that was sent. I'm not sure it's all the data that I had asked for or not, but regarding the school district consultation, and I've been to some of these meetings, I've seen districts do it amazing, and then I've seen districts that I think are significantly lacking. How does ADE know that the districts are having those consultation meetings with private schools and homeschoolers in their boundaries? They have to report it, right?
Yes.
Okay. One of the things I asked for was that district reporting information of their required meetings with private schools for meaningful consultation about what the needs are of the students within their districts. Do we have that information?
So members of the board, that information is kept with all the districts themselves. When we monitor to determine if they're consulting, we just find them in compliance or out of compliance based on if they're following the process. The other item I would mention too is that some of this is contingent that the district has actually filed correct accounting reports. So for example,
We can deal with the accounting reports thing separately. I just want to focus on my specific question.
okay,
The
I just want to indicate if we're pulling up a data request, it's still contingent upon the district filing a correct financial report, including what they put in AFRs too.
Okay, that's helpful. So where is the document when I sent the questions I was going to ask July 2nd for this meeting? Where is the document that shows compliance or not compliance, that the districts are actually having these meetings with special needs families, private schools, homeschoolers in the district? Where is that?
Yeah. The document is kept with the Exceptional Student Services, and it is kept there not for very long. It's just kept during when they monitor, and then they'll mark them in or out, and then the document remains at the school. But we do mark the non-compliance or the compliance.
Okay, so I'm frustrated because I asked for this to be part of the presentation, because what I'm trying to do is shine a light on that I think this is an important issue, and there's no document that we've been provided that shows how many districts are in compliance and how many districts are out of compliance. And if the board doesn't have that information, then the board cannot see either how amazing the districts are doing because they're actually working really hard to have those required meetings to get these funds out to these kids if they qualify, or if there's a big problem. We don't have that.
I asked for that, and I believe that last year we monitored 32 districts, and out of the 32, we found 8 of the districts out of compliance.
How many school districts do we have in the state of Arizona again?
We monitored more than 32 districts, but those were charters, and they're not included in this. So I don't know how many.
How many districts total is about, I think, about 120, 130.
Yeah.
So why don't we have data for all 120? Are you saying out of all those districts, you had 32 that were not doing what they were supposed to be doing and went under monitoring?
No, no. We monitor on a cycle every 4 years, and that's where we are getting our data.
Mhm.
So if we go in there and we see issues with the who's attending, or if they are having these meetings, then we would call them non-compliance and issue corrective action.
So what I'm just trying to get to, and hopefully we can get it after this point, is that information clear and clean. These are the districts that are doing this required meetings with private schools, having meaningful consultation about students with disabilities and their boundaries. These are the ones that are doing that. They're reporting it. It's good. It's great. These are the districts that are not doing that. And they need help, and this is what we're doing to help them. And I'm confused because I brought that up July 2nd. The second thing I asked for was funding that has come to the state in the last 5 years under IDEA, Part B, proportionate share obligation. Yes. For the last 5 years, how much was distributed and used by the districts in the last 2 years, broken down by district? And for any districts where no money was used. Is that what I'm looking at right now? I don't think so. I think this is just the 2024 allocation that's public, right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. So I'm just flagging that again, that I asked for some just really clear black and white information that I thought would be easy for myself to understand and for the board to understand, because again, data is valuable. And I want to know how much money is the state of Arizona getting, and our students with disabilities being shortchanged because the districts are not having these meetings and they're not offering services to students who may qualify. Are you aware of any, this is just my understanding is that this is just the number, like the calculations of how much money the districts were getting. So like if you scroll down to a district, like maybe jump down to like Deer Valley Unified School District, because they have a big number, so it's easy to look at. You click on Deer Valley Unified, and you kind of scroll to the right there, if you don't mind, so we can see the full chart. Which number, or sorry, to the left, my bad. Which number, how much money are they getting total? Is that the 6 million, 6.4 million?
That is correct. That's their total allocation.
Okay. And then tell us what the 91,000 is.
That's the obligation they have to spend on parentally placed families, or eligible parentally placed students within their boundaries.
Okay, then that's like for fiscal year 24.
Correct.
Where do we know, or where in any of these tabs here, and if it's not here, that's okay. This is something I asked for. How do we know that they've actually spent that money? Where do we see that?
So technically this grant's still open. So we wouldn't actually know until accounting reports are more or less done for federal government in about 3-4 more months if you're lucky.
Okay, well, and that's one of the reasons why I asked for the funding that's come to the state in the last 5 years and the amount used by districts in the last 2 years, broken down by district. And if the money was not used, where did it go? And if it was rolled over, I asked if I could see the waivers, because what I was trying to illuminate was if there are districts that are getting this money and they're not using it for students with disabilities, who are those districts and why is that happening? And the reason why I was particularly concerned is that I will not say the district, but I saw a school district that received $147,000 that has one of the largest private schools in the state in their boundaries. And it appeared to me that that district spent $0 on students with disabilities in their district. And that is a total tragedy, especially if after 27 months, we're learning that they can just apply for a waiver and use it for non-special needs students. The last couple of things I asked for was documentation by the district of what they chose to prioritize as services. So really important here, last two things I'll just kind of hit on. The districts do, as you mentioned, have a ton of power and control. I've had situations where my child qualified for proportionate share equitable services 1 year, and then the next year they said, oh, this year we're only prioritizing speech language therapy. The districts are allowed to do that. The hope is that the district does that because they actually have data, right? They've evaluated these kids and they're like, this is crazy, but we've got 45 students that are parentally placed within our boundaries that all need speech therapy. And so we really need to prioritize speech therapy this year. Instead, what it feels like from the parent side is they're just willy-nilly going, we're no longer offering any reading support this year. It's just going to be speech therapy. Or the districts that say, we're only doing speech therapy year after year after year, when we don't even know if that's what the kids in the district need. And then if the money is not used, it rolls over. And then in 27 months, they can apply for a waiver and keep it. So I asked for that documentation of what the district chose to prioritize for services, because some amazing districts do provide that. They put a public letter up and they say, this is what we prioritize. Do you guys have that documentation for the districts?
No, those are kept by the districts themselves.
Okay. And then let's see, the final question was, what outreach actions, if any, does the department take to notify private schools and homeschool families of this funding, proportionate share equitable services, and examples of those actions taken by the district? But I think you already pretty much addressed that really clearly at the beginning. So I have a lot of other questions, but I think we're hitting on time. My point in doing this was to publicly shine a light for the board, for people listening, for special needs families in the room and listening, that this money is out there. In addition to other funding that you might be receiving, like from an empowerment scholarship, it is your right to ask the school district how you would qualify for that. And it's your right to ask to be a part of meaningful consultation meetings that are happening every year to determine what the district is going to prioritize. I've recently seen Paradise Valley Unified School District do an absolutely incredible job being so transparent with parents, all the way down to at the beginning of the year, they're reaching out to families and they're saying, this is what we're prioritizing, this is how much, and here's all the providers you can use for these services. And if somebody's not on our list, you let us know, because we know that your child getting those therapies or services wherever is a priority. And I've seen other districts do a great job having those meaningful consultation meetings and having parents sign in, having a group process saying what's needed, and then other districts just completely not doing it. And I'm super concerned about this issue. So I don't know if other board members are going to share my concern, but it's something I want us to continue to look into. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Clark. Member Kravickas.
Thank you, members. Now, my understanding, though, is whatever's left over, the district, of course, can apply and keep it, but it is only for IDA students, right? For special education students in the district. It's not for any.
Yes, and if they don't apply for a waiver, technically the funds will be redistributed in allocations, respective of those regulations, or it would just expire and go back to the feds.
Okay. And I didn't speak to parents individually. I did have the luxury of attending a meeting or two. I only talked to the private schools. And so my concern is probably a little bit different. And again, this is not just Arizona. I can't stress that enough, but it really, they're not database conversations because they were kind of one-off conversations. So it's not, that's why they kind of do just the speech or the reading, kind of all the districts the same, because they're not having those all district-wide meetings with the private schools to really look at all the data and say, okay, what all disabilities do we have representative, and how can we best meet that, rather than just say, well, we think the most, which we already know numerically, the most are speech and language and SLD and OHI, but they really weren't database. And the only other thing I would tell you guys is I fear that the numbers of the students are underrepresented. And, I hadn't even thought about the COVID. So we've got the post-COVID, all that other stuff happening, and the opening of a lot of new schools. But the reason why is because what I heard from some of the private schools is that because the school district has told them over the years that all we're going to do is speech, if the parents come to them with something else, they're just like, well, this district's not going to do it. So they don't even go in the process. So those numbers don't get reflected. And another thing and then we have some private schools who just, I think you alluded to it already, just don't want to just don't want to go that route. And I respect that, but that was definitely an issue that affects the numbers. But the third thing that I heard that affected the numbers is that they are required to enroll in the school district, that to get services, even though it's some special category. I heard this from 3, that it's a paperwork thing, but some parents don't even want to do that, even though it's kind of just for paperwork only. I mean, I just wanted to throw that out there because I heard that enrollment requirement was a barrier.
Yeah, I can comment to that, members of the board. The districts are required to report on that through the student accountability system because it's a requirement of reporting in general. So they are required to get basic information. And once again, they have to determine eligibility, not like a medical diagnosis. They actually have to determine eligibility. So that is also a factor with some of the numbers that have skewed over time or changed over time because sometimes families don't want a reevaluation.
So it's probably, so they kind of, and I'm using these terms loosely, they kind of do have to enroll them in order to see that data and SACE.
No, we make it very clear with districts that it's not enrollment because that entitles a whole concept of FAPE and entitlement.
Right.
So now I do know in COVID, we had to work really hard, particularly in clarifying that with districts, particularly registrars, but we're dealing with different administrative parts of the school district. We would hope in a perfect world, the special education department talks to the registrars who do the data reporting. Doesn't always work like that. But most of the time now, the way that I have expressed it to the districts is you can't put an excessively high burden. You just need to prove the basic components that you're just not making up a child, basically.
I appreciate that, but that may be a strategy in terms of reiterating some guidance out there because that was a big misunderstanding. And the last thing, one of the recommendations I also threw out there is under Title I, ESCA, school districts have to, state departments have to have an ombudsman for the ESA. Is that right? And I was wondering, and again, it'd be optional, it's not required, if that same person could also serve as an IDEA ombudsman, because parents, or I shouldn't say parents, I didn't really talk to parents. Private schools didn't feel like they had anywhere to go to get information outside of their own district. And again, they didn't want to file complaints because they really want to have good relationships.
Sure. And part of my other job with the department, I work with the ombudsman a lot right now, particularly because we're working on EANS and so forth. So we do have a constant communication with her, and she knows how to refer those questions. And she talks about the consultation process a little bit too, about the IDEA. She's not an expert in special ed, but she very clearly has looked at our guidance and we've looked at theirs, and we try to coalesce and collaborate when we can to make it easier for the districts. So.
Perhaps we could message that out though to private schools that they could call that person and get some basic questions answered if they needed to.
That's duly noted. I think some of the challenges she's had, particularly when we experimented with that, was they would start diving into special ed details pretty quickly. And it's already being, now it feels like they're being pushed around to the department. So, but I can see if we can add a couple more bullets and maybe go to another layer.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do we have additional questions from our members joining virtually? Okay, I had a question about the ombudsman. Is that individual housed within special services or is it within just ADE?
Title I, Title I and Title II, but that ombudsman also works with Title III and Title IV, some of the other proportionate share programs too.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions from members? Okay, well, thank you all so much for your time and your presentation. Given the time at 11:13, I think, let's take about a 10-minute break and we'll reconvene at 11:25.
Testing 1, 2.
Hi, can those joining us virtually, if I can ask the board members to open their cameras, please?
Okay, great. Well, thank you all so much. And we are now going to move to item 5C, Executive Director Ross. Oh, I think really fast, Chris, you wanted to clarify a number of how many school districts you guys engage regarding the proportionate share.
Sure. Earlier, the discussion of exact numbers of school districts, the number that I had thrown out there was the number of school districts with proportionate share obligations on average. So for just clarity and context, the question was total number of school districts in the state is about 200, of which about 100 to 120 any given year have proportionate share obligations for the main bulk of the obligation, and the very small amount of 3 to 5 is much lower than that. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you very much. Okay. Executive Director Ross, 5C, please.
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we're going to have a presentation from Trevor Stokes as a consultant with ADE regarding the Perkins 5 Arizona State Plan. As a quick reminder, the Perkins 5 plan oversees funding for CTE for the state. It is required that a state submit a state plan for its Perkins grant every 4 years. The department brought a draft of that plan before the board in the spring. In June, the board voted to have the department submit a budget for FY25 and then the performance levels for ELA and math for CTE students for FY25, with the plan of having the department continue to work on revising the overall state plan to bring back before the board for a vote in the spring. And so Mr. Stokes is here to discuss an update on that plan. So Trevor?
So good morning, Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. My daughter graduated high school 2 years ago, and she recently told me there was one reason that she managed to make it through high school. For background, my daughter has multiple disabilities. She struggled through much of her high school experience. But when she was in this conversation with me, she said, I don't think I would have graduated high school without my culinary arts program. That was what she said kept her engaged. That's what arrested her interest. And that's what stoked her passions. And that made her engage with the learning experience to the degree that she could successfully complete high school. To finish that story, she is now a licensed cosmetologist, working a very good job, doing very well, right? So there are reasons like that are why I am a champion of career and technical education, because we believe, that education is successful when there's a clear destination for our students. One of our students of the month earlier today mentioned how she was driven by her career pathway, and that was her phraseology, right? That topic of career literacy, career awareness, that's what drives a lot of what we do. So my firm has been contracted by the department to facilitate a revised version of the Perkins state plan. And I'm here today to introduce our approach to that project. There won't be nearly as much technical content or data and data visualizations and graphs as you will likely see from me in the future, and which people who are familiar with me are accustomed to seeing on my screens. So today, what I really want to do is introduce our approach to this and how we hope to get through this process and get to a Perkins state plan that will not just satisfy, but hopefully will delight to every degree possible all the stakeholders involved in this system. Slide. So I did want to take just a quick second to introduce who we are and why we are here. Slide. My firm is called Pathway to Careers. Some of you may know that I left the Arizona Office of Economic Opportunity, where I managed workforce programs for 5 years, to open my own firm in January of 2020, because as we all know, that was the best possible time to start a new business. So I operated supporting school districts, workforce boards, chambers of commerce across the state, across the country for about 4 years. And then earlier this year, sold my firm and merged with NS Fared, an education and curriculum firm out of East Tennessee. And we became Pathway to Careers, expanding that concept of career-connected learning beyond just the adult audience, workforce boards, into K-12 education, and with a particular emphasis on career and technical education. Slide. So we developed a complete suite of products and services, but the only reason I'm showing you this is because I wanted to illustrate our philosophy. Everything we do is driven by the idea that what a student does in college, or in high school, excuse me, either is or should be obviously relevant to the balance of that individual's life. So when we developed a math curriculum that provides learning on all the appropriate standards, we can adjust easily to any system of state standards. We present every one of those standards within the context of how that is used in a real world career. If you're going to solve quadratic equations, that's great. How about we tell our students why that matters to a police officer? Right? If we're going to ask for graphing differential equations, how about we explain why that matters to life as an architect? We show the career relevance to all of these academic concepts in all of our products and services. Slide. So that is why we were contracted to assist with the revision of the state Perkins plan. Slide. We have a number of things that we're going to do, but as I mentioned earlier, we want to move this process to a yes. We want to get acceptance and delight from every individual involved in this system. Slide. So there are a couple of guiding principles that I have committed to during the process of this work. Slide. Those 5 guiding principles are this. And number 1, and Kevin Imes made it clear that there was no compromise on this in his conversations with me, that everything we do has to bring value to our students across the state. I've also committed that we're going to bring value to our employers and communities, and we intend to honor the vision of the state board. Because of that, we are engaged in direct meetings with all of you. We have sent email invitations, asking for some one-on-one time with you. And the reason for that is simply that I want to understand your vision in clear terms, in an unhurried, unrushed environment, so that we can start to summarize the vision of this board for education in Arizona in general and career and technical education in particular. We also intend to honor the work that has been done to date, because that work was in large part done by CTE practitioners on the ground in the districts, interfacing with students every day. And I have immense respect for the people in that role and for their expertise on how policy is going to impact their daily work. And then lastly, we commit to documentation and communication. So one of the things I always do, because we do a lot of Perkins planning, WIOA, local plans, a lot of strategic planning. One thing I will never do is come to a meeting where I'm asking a project manager or a board like this to approve a deliverable that they are only then seeing for the first time. So we will be providing iterative versions of this work as we go. And we intend to know ahead of time that we have developed a plan that honors your vision and that will redound to the benefit of our students across the state. Slide. So in our initial work to understand the current state, we went back and reviewed in detail all of the state board meeting recordings in which the state plan was discussed. I was here at a recent board meeting as well and heard the discussion before the last vote. Then I have had a number of conversations now, one-on-one conversations with staff of the board and with a few of the board members. I have more scheduled in the upcoming weeks. And in that work to understand where our current state lies, we identified 4 streams of work in which we are going to couch our efforts to revise the state plan. Slide. Those 4 streams start with board engagement. And as I mentioned, we are actively engaged in doing that. Slide. We've had one-on-one meetings with board staff. We're working on those individual meetings. And we are not doing that just for the sake of checking a box. We are going to draft a summary of what we understand this body's vision to be. And we will present that as soon as we can, depending on the rate at which we're able to engage with you board members. And then we will share that progress at upcoming board meetings. So you'll hear regular updates from myself on this process as we go. Slide. So the second stream of work that we identified based on your feedback on this Perkins plan was industry engagement. Slide. And another slide. We intend to leverage our relationship with the Arizona Economic Education Commission, which has 10 industry working groups representing 10 of the most highly valuable and growing and important industry groups in the state. We are working with others as well. We're hoping to find other avenues into industry engagement that we can execute within the time frame that we have, but this is the one from which we've already secured commitment. So I have just that one on the slide. Slide. The next stream of work is the SDLP. The state determined levels of performance were the subject of intense conversation, and we are committed to reviewing that in detail. Slide. There are a couple of different ways that we want to make sure we address this. Number one, we want to make sure that we understand and that we communicate well what we are and are not required by the law to do in terms of defining these levels of performance, right? Where that is, where we have to implement changes because of guidance from the Federal Department of Education, we will provide communication and strategic support to our districts and other partners in the way of updating them on how these different SDLPs will impact them and what they can do to ensure successful outcomes on each of those 6 measures. So where we do have any kind of leeway, we will make sure that you are able to see the formula, to see the development of the definitions and the numerators, denominators, the percentages, all of the things that go into those state determined levels of performance, right? I will, as a side note, when I ran my own firm, my standard for myself and my team in going to and participating in any meeting of any kind was this: if you're going to go to the meeting, my expectation is that you will be the most prepared and most knowledgeable individual in the room. That's the way I approach meetings. I don't know in a body like this that I can be the most knowledgeable, but I will come to you prepared and with background material in hand as we go through these very sticky and somewhat technical issues. And then lastly, slide. The last one is the post-secondary funding split. Currently, our Perkins funding goes 82% to secondary, 18% to post-secondary. Slide. And we are going to write an impact analysis in terms of what it would mean if those numbers were changed in impact to students. Because again, guiding principle number one, we are going to bring value to students through what ends up in this plan. Then we will use an analysis of comparable states to understand where we are in terms of this issue and where, and whether we are particularly out of scale with them or in scale with them, and kind of understand where we are within that larger universe of CTE funding at the state level. Slide. So, and slide, your project team here includes 5 people. We meet regularly, slide, to review the project. Dr. Joseph Goins was the founder of NS for Ed. He's now the CEO of Pathway to Careers. My colleague, Tracy Bryan, has been here on site with the department to meet with the project team. She's involved in our weekly meetings. I am involved, of course. Colette and Kevin Imes are also providing leadership for us through that project team. Slide. So we have a fairly aggressive timeline because of where we are in this process. Obviously, you know, it would have been preferable to not have to rush this process. Slide. But because of our timeline, we have to do a few things kind of in a hurry. You're going to get updates on these efforts at some upcoming board meetings through the end of the year. Slide. But because of the timing for our deliverables, slide, and another one, please. So we do have to have a plan ready to go by January 15th. That's going to be submitted to Colette and Kevin at the ADE so that they can make any last revisions or additions that they want at that point. In order to make our timeline, we have to have it out for public comment by February 1st. So that is, we're working backward from there to meet all of these deliverable deadlines. And then, of course, we will be back here on April the 13th, hopefully with a plan that you already know you love. Right? Slide. So I do encourage you to reach out to me at any time. Sean sent an announcement about this and an invitation for you to connect with my team so that we can hear from you about what it is you want, hear from you about how you see this issue. And I will give you one quick recap. I don't think Dr. Kaur would mind my sharing this one. But when I had my one-on-one conversation with him, I asked him, what is your vision for education in Arizona and for CTE in particular? And his answer was great, but that's not what I wanted to share today. The following comment was, that's the critical question you need to ask every member of this board. That's what he wanted to document. He said, that's where we needed to start. And we will work backward from there to develop the strategic elements that can make that vision come to life. There is a lot of limitation in a Perkins plan on what can and cannot be included. But one of the other things Kevin Imes committed to a couple of weeks ago was the development or the initiation of a new strategic planning process. There is a CTE strategic plan. It is fairly old now. There was a revision process started, but never completed because of some turnover at the leadership of the department. But Kevin has said he wants to re-engage that strategic planning process so that we can get down to detailed tactics, strategies, and metrics that will govern the development of CTE in Arizona in our following program years. Slide. And with that, I thank you for your time. It is always my pleasure to be here with you, and I will entertain any questions or answers, comments. Vice President Haley.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate meeting you. And I know a number of the board members have already met with you. I look forward to my conversation with you. I can't see if we have any of our team members online. Do any of you all have questions that you would like to re-ask Mr. Stokes?
I have no questions.
You do or no? Okay. Dr. Clay, I love it. I think with that, I think we're all set for this meeting. I'm sure we'll have questions for you at our next meeting.
Absolutely.
But thank you so much. Thank you for your enthusiasm and for bringing so much experience to this process.
Thank you.
Moving on to, we are now shifting to item 5D as in David, and I believe Policy Director Yanis, you are going to provide us an update.
All right. I can still say good morning, Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. I'm going to, I feel like the school kid that's holding everybody up at the end of class with my last presentations here, but I'll be covering the statutory compliance that we have for a biannual review on Antelope for our receivership that we placed back in June of last year. So this will just be a brief update on some of the progress that they have made over the course of the past year. So as of this year, in June, the district was within their budget for the first time since 2018. So it's been about 6 years. They were able to fall within their budget and also pay down their interest from around $75,000 down to in the 50 range, as well as making improvements on paying down the registered warrants by over $150,000, which was $50,000 over what they had estimated at the beginning of the year. Aside from that, the district has hired on a full-time superintendent, and they have also hired on a full-time business manager. And then on their financial improvement plan, they will look over the next 3 to 5 years to continue paying down and building cash reserves to get the warrants down on around $200,000 a year, as well as continue developing financial controls that are more thorough and a budget freeze on non-essential expenditures. That is all I have for Antelope right now, but if members have questions, I would be happy to answer.
Do we have any questions from members joining us virtually? Member Meyerson.
Thank you so much. Deputy? Yeah, what do I, Ms. Marianas? Yeah, what's your title officially? Deputy, yeah.
Project Director of Policy.
Project
Yeah,
Director.
it's interchangeable. It's
I was
changes
like,
on the day.
what do I, okay. One thing that I think would be really interesting, and you can tell me if this is sort of outside of the scope of this, but obviously like huge, exciting, like great news for this particular district. I think just in light of sort of kind of ongoing kind of statewide cuts around education, ongoing ESSER funding, everything that is happening to schools, I wonder if we might be able to pull from this experience the top 3 things, the top 5 things that this district did to support the financial health of their district and share that back with the broader set of school districts. Obviously, like we're not dealing with people that are going into receivership or things, but everybody is facing budgetary concerns. And I think to share best practices of how they did this so remarkably, I think would be really beneficial.
Yeah, of course. I think it's a great idea. And I'll look forward to working on that. I'll reach out to the receiver and see if there's some work that we can do there to find.
Share back at maybe a future board meeting. Awesome. Appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, thank you so much for that update, Policy Director Yanez, and we will now move on to item 5E as in Edward. So anything that you need to update us on, Executive Director Ross?
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. This is a slight change in format from what was presented to the board last month. This was a recommendation from the Special Education Evaluation Advisory Subcommittee related to the desire for a cost study by the Arizona Department of Education for what it would cost to develop and implement a system by which they could track at the school and district level the number of denials that are issued for full and individual evaluation by a school or district for a student. Originally, when you all approved this recommendation, it was written in a format of a rule change, but upon further review, it didn't really fit as a rule change. It's more of a task. And so in discussion with the board members who were involved on the Special Education Advisory Subcommittee, it was just changed in structure. So instead of it being a rule change, it's going to be a request to the Arizona Department of Education, but the content is the same, holding that cost study to determine a system by which those data could be collected.
Okay, great. And is this an item we'll still need to vote on? Is this correct?
That is correct. Thank you.
Okay, well, in that case, do I have a motion that the board call for a cost study by the Arizona Department of Education for building and developing a system by which ADE is able to collect and aggregate data on the number of students who are issued a denial for a full and individual evaluation by a school or district? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Dr. Clay, do I have a second?
Second?
Member Clark, seconds. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Great.
I'm sorry, but Vice President Haley, just to clarify, Member Tovar, was that a nay?
That was an aye.
Oh, okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. So the ayes have it, and all agreed. Wonderful. Now we are going to move on to item 5F, Executive Director Ross.
So much like the last item, this was a recommendation from the Special Education Evaluation Subcommittee. This one is for a rule change to R72401E4, which is the timeline for issuance of prior written notice and availability of contact information. Effectively, this calls for, it clarifies the ability of LEAs to issue a prior written notice at the end of a data review meeting to a family instead of having to wait, which sort of extends timelines out. It also instructs LEAs to do so if they don't do so within the same meeting, to do so within 5 days. And then it calls for LEAs to clearly identify a point of contact for special education evaluations in all of their materials, including their web pages. So again, you all voted on this to approve this recommendation. This is the formal vote to open rulemaking.
Great. Thank you so much for that background. All right. So we are now, do I have a motion that the board open rulemaking procedures for AAC R7-2-401.E.4, timeline for the issuance of prior written notice and availability of contact information?
So moved.
Member Clark makes the first motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Member Kravickas makes the second. So for all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. All right, the ayes have it. Awesome. Moving along, item 5G. Policy Director Yanes, you are going to provide us an update on rulemaking procedures for educator discipline.
Yes, so this is our educator discipline package from SB 1560, this most recent session, because it's a statutory compliance rulemaking piece in large part. We don't have a revision update for you today, but we wanted to keep with good rulemaking practice and provide an open space for public comment. And we also have a public hearing that is upcoming on October 9th.
Great. Do we have any questions for Policy Director Yanes? Seeing that there are none, we are going to move on to item 5H. And again, Policy Director Yanes.
All right. Thank you. This one is exactly the same down to the public hearing date. So the public hearing is set for October 9th. And this rulemaking package is for the Holocaust and other genocides instruction. The legislation passed in the most recent session changed it from 2 occasions that it needed to be taught in grades 7 through 12 to 2 occasions, but separated by 3 class periods each.
Wonderful. Do we have any questions on the regulatory process update? No? Seeing that there are none, we're going to move on to item 5I and Executive Director Ross.
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. This is also an update on a rulemaking package the board voted to open in the August meeting regarding changing the age of special education transition services for special education students in high school from the first IEP meeting after they turn 16 to the first, or to the occurring by the end of 9th grade. We've received a lot of feedback on this, but I think Member Kravickas probably wants to address that. So I'll actually, if there are any questions from the board.
Any questions? Member Kravickas?
Thank you, board members and Director. I kind of have a question about this, but all of them. I should have asked earlier. I'm assuming that during these updates, if there's feedback from the field, we'll either get it in writing or no. So I can assume that there's nobody, no concerns have been raised about G or H yet. Okay, just want to make sure. I didn't want to assume. As we saw from the comments submitted, if you read them, I think it was number 4, we have really good feedback from the field. I did get one piece of feedback last night that I will bring to staff. Under federal law, school districts have to issue a formal prior written notice when there is a change in placement, and graduation is considered a change in placement. So there was a request for clarity that this 1-year notification is not that, and it's distinct. So I think it's should be an easy one, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
And I would just highlight the feedback we've received from large organizations like AZ Case and others in support of this rulemaking package. As Rico said, a public hearing is been scheduled, and we're taking all feedback in as part of that consideration. And again, this is an update on the rulemaking.
Wonderful. Well, I think we've concluded item or section 5. We're now going to move to item 6 on the agenda. This is again a time for a call to the public. This is an opportunity for members of the public to comment on items on today's consent portion of the enforcement actions. All speakers will be limited to 2 minutes. And Executive Director Ross, have we received any requests to speak?
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. We did not have any requests to speak during this call to the public. However, Rebecca Mohammed from the first call to the public has valiantly hung in, and we've fixed the technology issue. And so she has asked to speak during this time. So Rebecca, are you with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can. And thank you again for your patience with the technology.
Okay. There are over 70,000 Arizona parents using the ESA program, and we are in dire need of help from the ADE and our ESA director, John Ward. We face delays close to 3 months for reimbursement and paying vendors ranging from several hundred to thousands of dollars. Some parents are forced to drain savings and max out credit cards just to cover therapy, tutors, and tuition, and to buy basics educational supplies. Due to this, our kids are often dropped from services. We are facing months of delays waiting for curriculum and school supplies to be approved, only to have the price change. We encounter order rejections from some untrained agents, and our uploading curriculum disappears from class wallet. We get rejected and wait another 2 to 3 months. How can 70,000 parents receive adequate help when we face 2 to 3 hour hold times, dropped calls, and daily messages during business hours stating that we can't even get through due to high call volumes? And there are rules and thresholds that are not outlined in the handbook or the law that's being enforced on us. We only find out after waiting months to be rejected. These need to be communicated to all the parents transparently through email. And then, according to ClassWallet Amazon, our organization is restricting the purchase of basic educational supplies without notifying the parents, limiting how we can use our funds. I humbly plead, who is going to advocate for us? And will that be another 2 to 3 months? Thank you.
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, that concludes this call to the public.
Great. Thank you so much. I think now we are going to move on to item 7 of the agenda. The consent agenda for enforcement actions will be taken in a single motion. Do I have a motion to approve items 7A1 through 7A10, 7B1 through 7B3, 7C1 and 7C2, and 7D1 through 7D3? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Member Clark makes a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Member Kravickas makes a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay. The ayes have it. So we'll now move to item 8. This is a call to the public. This is a time for the public to comment on items of the general session portion of the enforcement actions. All speakers will be limited to 2 minutes. Executive Director Ross, have we received any requests to speak?
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, we do not have any requests to speak for this call to the public.
Okay, thank you. We're now going to move on to item 9. Again, I would like to take these items in a single motion. Do I have a motion to approve items 9A1 through 9A4, 9B1 through 9B8, and 9C?
So moved.
Member Clark makes the first motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Superintendent Horn made the second motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Say nay. The ayes have it. So with that, Executive Director Ross, any announcements?
Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, the next board meeting will be Monday, October 21st in the boardroom, starting at 9 o'clock.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thanks for everybody's participation and engagement and questions. With that, I'd like to adjourn today's meeting at 12:03 p.m. I think we get the fastest meeting award.
We did have a 90-minute one once, but that's never going to be beaten. So this was
Okay.
great.
Okay, our fastest fall one.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.